The Morning Sports Desk, available on demand on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and WDenaRadio.com.
It is the Morning Sports Desk on a Friday, the 30th of August. I'm CJ Baumgartner. Corey Tackman joining me as always. Corey, we've made it. We are now in the first week of high school sports across central Minnesota. We're going to break down last night's action, preview some games that we have on the airwaves tonight. Before we do that, Corey, we're going to do a little lightning round of Minnesota State sports. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. Twins stink, specifically RE bullpen. Vikings made a surprise cut with Jaron Hall. They don't play for another week. The Minnesota Gophers lost, but still fired off some post-game fireworks. And anything else you got?
I watched the Gopher game. I loved their uniforms.
Uniforms are great.
They look so good, which is become now kind of the MO of this Gopher era is they look good and don't play good. I'm aware that that's not proper English. I don't know why their offense is so inept all of the time. Brosmer clearly looks like he can do some things. He's showed that especially. It's also just
had like 70 passing yards going into the fourth quarter too, which is more on the philosophy stuff.
Right. I don't think we'd feel as bad about the Gophers if you unleash the dragon and he makes that kick. I mean, it's that simple. It's one of those like, oh, they put it together. They found a little offensive groove. They got the field goal. They get the walk-off win. Let's move on to next week. It would have felt much better had that been the case, but because he missed the field goal, you start to feel weird about some things. So anyway, my goal is that stretch run in the fourth quarter was enough to show like, hey, the reason you bring a guy like that in is so that way you do have to throw it a little bit. He is mostly just a better looking Kirk Ferentz. And I'm talking about PJ Fleck.
That's what he's aspiring to be. It feels
he's a better looking and less successful version of Kirk Ferentz, which is not complimentary.
Right. It's like a used car salesman version of Kirk Ferentz.
So, but as always is the case, they'll be prepared for other games, and they'll win a game or two that they shouldn't, lose a game or two that they shouldn't, and that stinks. That was a game that they should have won. I saw NDSU tried to make it interesting. The game was probably closer even than it should have been because I can't remember. Was it end of third quarter, end of the half?
NDSU was up going into halftime, and then they scored one touchdown. They did not get the 2-point try in the second half, but that was towards the end when Colorado was like, it wasn't a garbage time touchdown. That's not what I'm trying to say. It was like one of those, like, Colorado says we're up by 2 scores. We'll let you score if you take some time off the clock, and we'll try and.
Well, and also I can't. I don't know if it wasn't that apparently at the end of the half. It was some maybe end of one of the quarters. I think Shador threw an interception off the back leg. Like it was just not like they were going to score. They were right there to score again, and then had kind of a weird fluky pick. So it ended up being closer, I think, than the score ended up being closer than probably the game actually was. But that's mostly the main point of all of this is to say every team around us who we care about on a bigger level than high school is a bunch of losers. So let's move to the high school stuff.
Let's move to the winners in the high school athletes.
Winners.
Corey, you had the opportunity to get your first volleyball broadcast of the season in last night with Wadena, Deer Creek, and Perham, a rematch of last year's Section 8 2A title game in volleyball where Wadena, Deer Creek, I believe, won that one 3-1. How did they do last night?
Well, I will describe it thusly. When I walked out of the gym last night, I had someone in a Wadena Deer Creek shirt, fan, look at me as we were walking out of the back of the gymnasium, look at me and say, well, it wasn't pretty, but we got the W. And I think that is probably the best way to describe that matchup. It wasn't pretty, really from either side. And some of this is, early season blues a little bit. I would say probably most of it is just the early season blues. Wadena Deer Creek ends up winning in 4. They take the first two sets, 12-16. The Yellow Jackets take the third to 21, and then the Wolverines win the fourth to 22. So it was a little sloppy on both sides. It was the Yellow Jackets are very young. There's clearly some talent there, and they started to really show signs of life. I thought about the midway point of set number 2, and they just couldn't stop kind of stepping on their own toes in those first 2 sets, which helped Wadena Deer Creek take that 2-0 lead. The Wolverines couldn't get out of their own way in set number 3, and the Yellow Jackets really started to play better in that third set as a whole. Halfway point of the second set forward, they played better, and in the third set they stayed out of their own way while the Wolverines kind of kept tripping over themselves. And then, just kind of a nice back and forth fourth set that the Wolverines end up pulling out 25-22 to get the 4-set victory. It was not, I'm just trying to be respectful about this, CJ. It was just early season volleyball. It was sloppier, I think, than either coach would like or appreciate, but it was, that's how it goes. You don't like it, but also that is how it is.
Yeah.
This is, I know there's they play, there's JO volleyball all summer. Everybody plays every sport all year round, no matter what. That's just kind of how sports work these days. So there's probably less of an excuse to play bad, but the fact of the matter is this still is the first time that it actually really counts. Mm-hmm. And, it depends on how you show up that day, really. So Wolverines improved to 2-0. The Yellow Jackets fall to 0-2 under first-year head coach Paige Thompson, and the Wolverines have DGF on Tuesday, so another big 8AA section matchup in this early season, and the Yellow Jackets take on Hawley, Coach Thompson's alma mater. So some big early next week matches on Tuesday for those two clubs.
Yeah, big section matches. By the way, Wadena Deer Creek, they were 8-0 in Section 8-2A last year, now starting off 2-0. Since re-entering Section 8-2A, Corey, they have not lost a section game, including playoffs.
Useful,
helpful, because obviously you can't get to state unless you play well in your section. So we'll keep monitoring that as the season goes along. Last night, I had my first football game of the year. I was down in Bertha for the Bertha-Hewitt versus Northwoods game, starting off in 9-man, talking with Coach Jared Humberg, who's in his 4th season now. It was just kind of, hey, what do you know about this team? What do you know about them? He's like, well, they're a lot like us, where last year Bertha-Hewitt only had a couple seniors, same thing with Northwoods. So, kind of trying to see which team can start to take those next steps and have some veterans or now kind of these underclassmen who are moving into the upperclassmen status start to kind of take that next step a little bit. And overall, Bertha played, was talking with Coach Humber again before the game. He's like, something we did really well last year when we were successful was getting big plays. And they got that in the form of 2 different fumble recoveries on kickoffs they were able to get. They also got big plays in terms of a 60-yard touchdown run from Caden Kimber, who also was 2 for 4 on point after try kicks. They were just able to get some big plays and prevent Northwoods from doing much. They ended up winning the game by a score, I believe 36-18 ended up being the final, or 34-18 was the final score. They won that handily, got to 1-0 on the season, and it kind of kicked off. I don't know if it's just a section thing with that Section 5 in 9-man, Corey, but they really like to play that first game of the season on Thursday night, because not only did Bertha-Hewitt play last night, but if you look in 9-man across that section, you had a couple other teams playing. Verndale beat Carlton Renshaw yesterday 62-0. You have Nevis, the defending state champions in 9-man, beating Sabika 44-12. And of course, those are the teams in our listening area. There's a few others that are way out there. Otter Tail Central played Goodridge Griglegatsky. OTC lost 30-8. But again, I kind of like it distributing out
to those teams that you mentioned. Like that's Section 5 9-man football, isn't it? Those 6 teams.
OTC is in 4. They're in the one that's out west.
But the other ones that you mentioned.
Yes. Yeah.
That whole set. Yeah, you're right. There were a lot of games in 9-man. That whole section played.
I kind of like it.
Get it going on a Thursday?
For like week 1. You know what I mean? Like it just kind of gets everybody, like, you know, you're not quite into that game mode yet where it's got to be Friday. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. You know, Bertha-Hewitt also moved the kickoff time up to 5:00 because Northwoods is up by Reamer, which is a good drive from Bertha-Hewitt, 2.5 hours ish, like more probably depending on the road conditions. So to move that kickoff up meant I could go home and watch the 4th quarter of the Bemidji State football game. So it all worked out for me.
That's not over in Cook. I think, I mean, if you think about the rest of the section, right? Carleton and like isn't Northwoods the team that Henning beat in the state championship basketball game 6 years ago?
Was it?
Isn't that Northwoods?
That is Northwoods. Yeah.
The Grizzlies?
Yep.
That's not
that's even further north and further east. Yeah, it's even worse. So you can see when they move kickoff up to 5.
It's a totally spread out weird section.
It's you just get like that when you get to northern Minnesota. It's tough. I can't remember if we talked about this on the sports desk or not, but this is a good chance to plug the football previews that we've been doing, and we have all 11 of them that are releasing on the air throughout Friday on the Superstation and KWAD, but also you can check all of them out at WDenaRadio.com or the Hubbard Radio Wadena YouTube page. We put them out on Facebook. Those videos are doing great. You guys have given great reception to those videos. It's been awesome. And talking with Sabika head coach Tanner Burgow, playing in that section, they got lucky last year where they played Nevis, Verndale, Sabika, Nevis, Verndale, Bertha-Hewitt, all in Sabika. And they only had one really far road game. Now they're playing all those teams on
to Carleton, to Northwood.
Right, exactly. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
It's like 900. What was it? 900 miles of road trip.
Like on the nose, 900 miles. Because all of their close teams were the away games. Now all the close teams are the home games.
Right.
And if you're Bertha-Hewitt, Nevis is still like a good hour plus. And that's like, at least that one's close. Yeah,
right. Exactly.
And that's just what it is in small town football. Once you get to northern Minnesota, it's just, and throughout Minnesota with small town football. But
I will also say, really good job, by the way, to CJ goes on those football previews. They're wonderful, as mentioned. Make sure you check them out on our YouTube channel, Hubbard Radio Wadena. At WDenaRadio.com, another place you can check it out. Superstation K106 Facebook page. They're all listed there. And I will transition this, CJ. You don't have to say a single word until I throw it over to you. I just want to also make sure that we clear the air on this. CJ worked with 11 different schools to get these previews done, and reached out to probably close to 20 schools. It wasn't quite 20, but the 11 that are done are the 11 that reached back and were able to schedule a time to get these things done. So if there are schools on there you're wondering why don't they exist, it wasn't because the effort on our end wasn't made. That being said, we have more football on our broadcast schedule tonight. You've got Wadena Deer Creek Wolverines and the KMS Fightin' Saints.
The fight, which I always consider a double, like an oxymoron, right? Are Saints fighting?
I mean, wouldn't you fight for the Lord?
I mean, yes. I think those were called the Crusades, but
It's weird to have a team be called the Saints, and by the way, not be a private school.
Right, exactly. And well, I think that's how they got I think if they were private, I don't think the diocese would let them be fighting Saints. Unless, of course,
yeah.
I mean, there was the Nicene Council where Santa Claus did beat up a heretic. So, like, I guess technically there is fighting Saints. That is an actual thing that happens. So
I think just read one history book and you're quite aware that a few saints, read a history book or a Bible and you'll be quite aware that a saint or two has had to fight once or twice.
Right. But you don't imagine like Mother Teresa putting on the brass knuckles. You know what I mean?
I'm here for the Lord.
The Lord says it's time to get your face to the sidewalk.
I mean, you got to, what is it to become a saint? You have to be, is it 2 miracles? Two miracles that were documented. I think it's 2 I mean, and probably are exorcisms counted as a miracle or no?
I would say probably not. But
an exorcism is its own separate. Because I'm saying exorcisms can probably get pretty physical.
Yeah, that's true. You're like, what, a demon's like coming out of somebody? You're like, oh, take that.
Yeah, well, you expect the demon to show up and just be like, all right, you got me, and just walk away. That's
you got me. I would have gotten away with it too if weren't you meddling kids and your dog. Yeah.
So tonight's game, regular Friday night, 7:00 kickoff as per usual on a high school football Friday. CJ.
Yep, Superstation K106, 105.9 FM, also streaming online worldwide. It's one word, Superstation K106 mobile app and WDenaRadio.com. Also another game, and we'll get to that in a second on our full coverage, but we do have on 98.5 FM and AM 1430, The Fan, KNSP. It is Staples-Motley at Frazee. Tyler Grunwald on the call for that one. He does a fantastic job now in his 3rd season of calling Staples-Motley football. And I know they were successful last year, and not that it was a shock to everybody, but certainly they went from winless to going to the section championship game, which is, just a fantastic turnaround for that team last year. And now they come in with expectations of getting back there. And that's been very vocal again in our Staples-Motley football preview, which should be released by the time you're listening to this, is just really, really nice. And again, they have expectations. Tyler even messaged me. He's like, it's going to be a fun year. Like, there's a buzz about Staples-Motley Cardinal football, and that gets started in Frazee. And again, you can listen 98.5 FM, AM 1430, KNSP, The Fan. Corey, I know you have had some brief conversation with Staples folks and Staples-Motley folks, and they're pretty excited about the red and white this year.
Well, I think, I'm married into a family from the Staples-Motley. So there's a few people I run into from time to time in my life. And obviously just not being around here long enough, you start to know enough people. And I quote, yeah, we've been talking about this group of guys for a long time. This is a group of athletes who've had some expectations on them, and have met those expectations through their entire athletic careers. They're still pretty young on top of it. They believe fully that they should be the favorites in the section. And we know it's a light section, right? I think there's only 5 teams in that football section. And it's really top heavy, at least, coming into this season. It's a pretty top heavy section with Staples-Motley, with Pillager, and with Osakis. I think high expectations for all 3 of those teams. Pillager beat Osakis last night. So that's the season 1 heavy duty matchup right out of the gate. So yeah, for the Cardinals, like I think they don't want nice things for their football program this year. They expect nice things for their football program this year.
Right. And again, we have the football preview up on the Hubbard Radio-Wadena YouTube page, Superstation K106 Facebook page, and WDenaRadio.com. If you want to hear everything that Coach Potter had to say and some of the players, because it's been very businesslike for them as they get ready for this season. Looking over to Wadena Deer Creek, they play their season opener today. I've already done the pregame interview with Coach Peter Meyer. And again, we have the Wadena Deer Creek one that will be coming out before game time and for their season preview. And I was talking with Coach Peter Meyer for the preview and in the pregame interview. And I kind of said, because they were kind of expecting this year that they've cycled through. I mean, they had 12 seniors last year and all of them played, which means that doesn't really allow your underclassmen, because you have that nice senior class, they don't get a ton of snaps. So now you're cycling through, and not a huge senior class this year, only a handful of kids, which means they are relying on last year's sophomores and freshmen to fill some important holes. And that's not always ideal for a football team, but in high school football, sometimes you just have the hand that you're dealt. And that's where Wadena Deer Creek is at this season. And talking with Coach Peter Meyer, it's like there's a lot of spots open. There's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of new stuff. Like what's been kind of the key message you've been telling everybody all kind of as your rallying cry throughout the season? And he said one word, it's compete. It's open. There's a lot of competition. Even throughout the season, you're going to have an opportunity if you show up and compete every day in practice, go to the games and compete. No matter what, he said, as long as they're competing, like, we are going to be happy with our guys out there trying to figure out some new spots and new roles and new quarterbacks and new defenders, new offensive. Like, everything is going to be new for this team. They're starting to do a little more. They've kind of reshifted some fundamental stuff and just kind of some things they want to hone in on this year. I know they've talked about just being better, like form tackling and just a little fundamental stuff, getting back to basics on that. They're going to try and run the football a little bit more, I think, this year. It's just going to be a new look in a lot of different ways for Wadena Deer Creek football. I'm excited to see that first iteration of it tonight. And in talking with Coach Petermeyer, he said, it's exciting that you get to, just strip things back down to the basics a little bit, because sometimes when you have those seniors, and a lot of them played as sophomores and worked their way through last year for Wadena Deer Creek, last year's seniors did, and you can kind of take for granted some things. He said they know this, they know that. And now you're working in some kids who are getting their first taste of varsity football, and you have to start from scratch. And he says, as a coach, that's what you love to do. You love to coach and teach and do all this stuff. So he said it's been very fun these first couple weeks of practice to get to be doing that. KMS has graduated some really good kids from a season ago, but they're traditionally been a very solid football program. It's going to be a tough game tonight, but it'll be fascinating to see how things play out.
Yeah, I think expectation levels for Wadena Deer Creek as far as wins and losses go, it's not a high expectation level, but not in a like, we're going to be disappointed with how this goes, right? Because I think because the expectation level just isn't that high. But I really like that choice of the word compete a lot, because they are gonna have uphill battles, I think, in a lot of games this year, because of all of that turnover, and because it's a lot of young kids. So you're talking about some kids who maybe played 8th grade football last year or 9th grade football a year ago, and now it's like you're even missing that JV level. If you were an 8th grader last year and expected to play varsity football this year as a freshman, and you missed 2 levels of football, that's a big leap. But what you can do is you can make sure when somebody comes to your house or you go visit somebody's house that you make their night miserable. And competing, this is the classic stuff, CJ, that every coach in every school across the entire North American continent and beyond talks about. This is like a life lesson season. Do you work hard? Do you show up every day? Do you push yourself? Do you push your friends? And the outcomes might not come in a win and a loss, but the outcomes show up in forms of growth. And by week 4, are you making the tackle that you missed in weeks 3, 2, and 1? Are you getting to the second level on a block as a lineman, rather than, are you not getting hung up on that? It's those sorts of things. And then here's what's fun is, because it is varsity football and wins and losses still do matter more than I think some people like to admit, less than others like to admit. But once you start doing those things and you're competing and doing things the right way, guess what? Those wins eventually will come. And when you have those nights where, hey, like this one feels like we've got a chance here, well, by golly, maybe you sneak that one out because you've done all of these other things along the way.
Right. It'll be really fun. It'll be fun to talk with Coach Petermeyer all season long. One last thing before we close the show, want to give a plug. Wolverines Weekly, the first episode of our coaches show for Wadena Deer Creek coaches and highlighting players spotlight, is going to be up tomorrow. Should be on the air tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, same time, same place, same channel, KWAD 101.7 FM and AM 920. And as always, on Monday, we will have the link put out for the podcast. You can get the podcast right after the program airs. We'll post it on Monday on the Facebook page, so you can check that out there as well. But you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as WDenaRadio.com and the Superstation K106 mobile app. I'm CJ. There's Corey. This has been the Morning Sports Desk for a Friday, the 30th of August.
The Morning Sports Desk, available on demand on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and WDenaRadio.com.